Welcome to the Cash Flow Project Podcast. Are you looking to better your financial situation by increasing your cash flow? Too busy to hunt for real estate deals or don't know where to start? Then you're in the right spot. Join us as we dive in and talk about investing for cash flow using multifamily real estate.
Welcome to the Cash Flow Project Podcast. I'm your host, Steve Fieros with Tri-City Equity Group. Today, super excited. We've got Hector Martinez on the show. Hector has had experience and a background in banking. He used to work for Wells Fargo, but of course, after time, you spend any time in any industry making money for other people and seeing how the wealthy clients and the wealthy people do it. You want to get started into getting involved to whatever they've got going. He noticed that people were making money in real estate, so he decided to. He also wanted to leave a legacy behind. So he just started looking for distressed properties, things that he could fix and flip. And start working on creating his own wealth, building his own wealth. So he's now turned that into a very successful fix and flip business based out of Atlanta, fixing 60 plus, almost tracking for 100 deals this year. So super excited to have Hector on the show. He's also got his hand into short-term rentals, so long-term rentals. So super excited to have Hector on the show and hear about his journey. Hector, welcome.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Steve. Thanks for bringing me on. I'm excited to be here and excited to share a little bit of my story.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. No, super excited to have you on. Thanks for taking the time. Well, for those of our listeners that may not be familiar with you and kind of your background, how you got started, everybody's got their own unique journey. So, I want to hear a little bit about what got you going, obviously getting out of the banking sector. But a lot of times, people's story starts way back, or starts in a different place. So, how did you get started on your journey?
Yeah. So, I mean, I don't want to go too far back, but let's just say that, I definitely had a very humble upbringing. I was born in Mexico City, Mexico. Both my parents are Mexican, and my father brought us to the country, and we settled in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and then we moved to Atlanta shortly after that, and man, I just saw my dad struggle, like making ends meet and, always just pushing for more. But the one thing I recall specifically is just like his desire to be an entrepreneur. Like he always just wanted to kind of be his own boss and, call his shots, at the end of the day. And he worked for several people, when we moved to the country, and he was like a painter, actually. So started working for a company that painted commercial buildings and residential houses. And shortly after, when we moved to Atlanta, he started his company, and it was just him, one-man team, and he kind of ran the books and he ran everything for his own little business. And I remember like how excited he was when he bought his first, van for the business, and just seeing that as a young kid, like it just really motivated me to want to do the same. And I think that's where the seed first started, right? Like where the seed first was planted of being an entrepreneur and just doing your own thing. But when we moved to Atlanta, my father got diagnosed with cancer. And so when I was 14 years old, actually, he passed away from cancer. So, it all kind of got really hazy for us there. And for me specifically, and then I kind of lost my purpose and didn't really want to do anything specific. And, but after some time, figuring out my teenage years in high school and all that, I ended up moving to Florida, where I got connected to some really, really positive like role models and people that were also entrepreneurs and in the ministry space, like the religious space, if you will. And then from there, that kind of remotivated me again to seek out what I was good at and my purpose. And fast forward a couple of years, I ended up, applying for Wells Fargo level entry job, and was making $32,000 a year, and that was like my introduction to the world of finance and real estate and the world of stock market. And every time I would sit down, looking at these people's accounts that would come and sit at my desk, I would always see just these huge accounts. And like, where did you get all this money? You know what I mean? Like in my bank account, I was newly married, and we had like, $1,000 in our account like every other week. And it was just like rough, we're just living paycheck to paycheck. And these guys, had hundreds of thousands of dollars in their account, and just asking questions. And a lot of them would respond, yeah, I own a bunch of apartments. I own multifamily. I own real estate. I have a construction company. And I was like, man, this is where it's at. And so I stayed there. I learned everything that there is to learn, in the world of finance. I'm really thankful for that, because this at the bank is where I learned the word probate and the word like deed and the word HELOC. Like that's where I got my education to then later apply it, to real estate. But it was a blessing, being there 6 years, and I was able to get my licenses. So I learned the stock market as well. I learned the financial aspect of investing. And, one day, a buddy of mine wanted to start a company doing mailbox installations for big neighborhoods. And so I kind of just took a leap of faith and was like, you know what? I'm tired of this, 9 to 5 shenanigans, and just went all in on that business. And, things didn't work out. That business is doing phenomenal, by the way. Shout out to GSI. But, it wasn't for me. In that building, I met a couple guys that had a huge construction company, and they also owned rental properties. And these were, Hispanic guys like me, like had a very humble upbringing as well, but now we're thriving, right? Like they had a bunch of rentals, they were fix and flipping, and they were doing multifamily construction jobs. So they would do the drywall and the paint. And, I was just amazed, and I was inspired more than anything that, guys like me were getting into real estate and just killing it, crushing it. And so those guys actually gave me my first loan for my first fix and flip. And it was during the time I was working with them that I think we ended up doing that year, maybe like 8 flips or something like that, while I still had my W-2 job. And, fast forward a couple of years now, that was in 2018. We've been able to do, 60 to 70. I think last year we did close to 100 properties year after year, and hit 7 figures, the last 2 years. And it's been a blessing, and in that space, we bought some rentals, we bought some Airbnbs, and we're now, just pushing through the current market changes, etc. So that's long version, I guess. I was kind of long-winded of my story, but yeah, I mean, it's that's kind of what happened.
No, that's awesome, man. I mean, and I almost hate to have to kind of even truncate like your story, because I know for a lot of people that's really inspirational. And we have a lot of people that, I know my family here a couple generations ago, same thing, immigrants that came to the country, and, we see that now, that's been kind of a hot topic, right? But I think a lot of people don't necessarily see, I'd say a lot of people that grew up here, born here, maybe don't always see the opportunity that's available, right? And so like you were like, okay, well, hey, I'm going to observe this. Like, what are these people? Obviously you saw a great example in your dad, kind of taking the reins and said, okay, well, let's venture out. Let's go after some business opportunities. Let's create some opportunity, right? Because he's out there, trying to make some stuff happen. That's a great example for you, for one. But then two, like, you're able to observe, okay, well, hey, I see business can work, right? And then you go to, let's say the bank, and you're observing more, right? And it's like, all right, well, hey, man, these people are doing business at a higher level, right? Like they've got cash in the bank, they've got property and all that kind of stuff. And kudos to you for asking, because how many people, are we around, like, let's say on any given day, that we might see, elements of success, and we don't always ask questions, right? We're not always like, well, hey, you know what? Even just striking up conversation, right? Like even, people need the smiles, right? They need like you mentioned, hey, it was a blessing. Yeah, you know what? Like people, they need that encouragement today, right? Like, so even stepping in and just like, hey, well, glad to service you in your account. Like, man, wow, like it seems like you're really successful. How do you do that, right? And that's just, that can open up a door, right? Like that goes to a conversation that you don't know where it ends, but now you potentially have a relationship, right? So good for you for kind of observing that, receiving that, taking it in. I've heard from we've had a lot of people on the show that have worked in different facets in the industry, right? Brokers, insurance, agents, all that kind of stuff. And I feel like, and even for me too, I started off wholesaling, but I always saw it as, well, I can build wealth for somebody else. I'm okay to build, your success, right? I'll bring you a deal, right? But it's like, oh, but for me, that's not, that's, I got to do, I'll continue to do my thing. I'm going to stay in my lane. And so we see countless people, I think too many, say, oh, okay, well, like that. They work in the financial industry, they work in the bank, they see those big accounts, but it's like, well, that's great for you.
Yeah.
But that's for you. But it's like, no, kudos to you for like, well, what do you do? I want to know, like, I don't know more.
Yeah, no, you know what, man? It's crazy because like it's such a mindset thing, and people really underestimate the mindset, that needs to happen. It's like a mindset change that needs to happen.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And I remember like during that time, asking questions and just being, curious about how people got to where they were. I don't even know who it was or when it was that I was recommended, to read the book that we all know, right? Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And I literally, just saw my life like being talked about in that book because, even though my father he kind of played both roles, like before we moved to the country, like he was actually in corporate. And when he came to the US, he worked for a bank, actually, believe it or not, in Mexico. And then he came over here and kind of like played the role of like the entrepreneur. But it was that book that kind of like changed my mindset and awoken, those things in me. It's like, wait a minute, yeah, you can be successful, but I think we allow fear to control what we are capable of. And so we want to fit in this box and in this society that, tells you this is the way you do things. And the reality is when I changed my mind, I changed my net worth, I changed my life, and I changed just my overall happiness. You know what I mean? But it all starts with the mind, like believing that you can. And I'm really thankful for the mentors that came along the way, to instill that in me. I look back at my dad's life and I'm like, if he had a mentor, somebody that could have said, hey, do business this way or do business that way, I think he would have actually had a really successful company because he was a very detailed man. He was a very, studious kind of guy. And had he just had someone, that could have mentored him in business, he probably would have, had a really successful company. But he never did, and so seeing that and now, growing up and realizing mentorship is real and is important, I think that's what helped me kind of make that transition that a lot of people don't make, is having people speaking into your lives that you can do it, do this, do that, avoid these pitfalls. You can get them all from books, right? We can learn all this knowledge, but when you have a mentor, like it just takes it up another level. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, for sure. And then that involves, I think, a couple of other things. I mean, for one, acknowledging that, hey, you know what, I don't have all the answers, right? Because if you feel like, well, I know it all, I got this, then you're not going to go out and to seek some additional inputs, seek some additional advice. Then too, like that opens yourself up to receiving criticism too, right? Like it's not a lot of people are hey, I'm scared to do wrong. I don't want to receive the criticism. And so when you do have a mentor, that kind of puts that accountability component into place to help kind of see, the action component of like, all right, well, I am getting knowledge. I am getting, I'm reading the books. I'm getting the information, right? But it's the applied information, right? That's when kind of the rubber meets the road, and kind of getting that feedback too on like, hey, you know what, we'll do that. Hey, you didn't do this right. You did this right. And that's great. But here's how you can make this part better. Right. Like, yeah. I think a lot of entrepreneurs and a lot of people that are trying to step out and take on new ventures, like that's a scary space, right? Like we don't always want to, we don't want to take that. So kudos to you for, for being willing to take that. Now, like the mentorship piece, is that something that you just found, hey, look, I'm just going to go out and take some action, and these mentors just kind of come along the way? Is this something that you would have to go out and seek as well? Like, how did that work for you? I mean, it's kind of different for different people, but
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you're definitely right. I think it's different for everybody, but I think number one, you have to be open to that, right? And then I think organically, either you go to somebody or somebody comes to you. For me personally, I think I was just in a very vulnerable space when, not having a father figure in my life, and so I kind of just was seeking for that approval, seeking for that information. That I'm a very spiritual person. I really believe that God just brought people into my life, and they were the people that I needed at that time, and so sometimes I think, there's people that come into your life that, are only supposed to be there for a season, right? And so
Mhm.
when I was in my teenage years, like I really needed that affirmation, that love, that attention. And I'm thankful, for the guys that God brought in that time to do that. But then I've always just kind of seen that in every level that I step into, or every season that I step into, there's something that's being defined, something that's being worked on, and literally God will just bring like a specific person. So like even now, like I have somebody that's in my corner. He's actually one of my lenders, but has just taken like this fatherly role, right? This is an much older man, and he's investing in my deals, but he has also the ability and the access to my heart to say, Hector, I think you're being too flashy. Like, Hector, I think you're being too much. Like, watch out for this. Watch out for this blind side. And he's a very wealthy businessman. You know what I mean? So, I think for whoever's listening, like you have to really look at your situation. And if you're trying to, enter into the space of real estate, or you want to enter into the space of multifamily or just business period, like look who's around you and really be self-aware. I think that's another thing that's downplayed a lot in this industry and just in business period. Number one is mindset. Number two is self-awareness. Like we have become this society, in my opinion, that is not self-aware, right? Of the areas that you need to work on. And so something that I do every year is like I really work on my self-awareness, and I almost do like a yearly review of my life in the areas of my strengths and the areas of my weaknesses. And just recently, bro, like I just sent an email to a lot of my network, people that are close to me, people that are connected to me, people that I'm doing business with. I think it was about 10 to 12 people. I sent them this email and I said, hey guys, I need some feedback. I need some criticism. I need 2 to 3 areas that I need to improve on. Like, what have you seen in me that I need to correct? What have you seen in me, my leadership style, that I need to fix? And, I got a bunch of responses, and a lot of people were pointing out similar things and blind sides that I need to correct. And so, that self-awareness, and having the ability, like you said, to be open for criticism can really help you scale in your business, scale as a person, and just grow overall as a human being. So for me, I think these two things have really helped me become successful and get to places where I want to be. And I'm still on my way, but it's that self-awareness, it's that mindset, and those mentors around you that can really help you get there faster. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's awesome. And that's actually really, I mean, I've got to think about that, right? Like how few of people would do that. I mean, for one, not only are, especially when we were talking about like business and whatnot, a lot of these contacts, like they're not usually just one-off things, right? Like your banker, right? Like how many deals are you going to work on if you're doing volume, like how many deals are you going to be involved in with, let's say, that one specific person, right? Same thing with your insurance guy or your contractors or whatever. And so if you're actually putting yourself out there to say, hey, you know what, I want to get better. And and again, this is you're being vulnerable in that aspect when you're putting that out there to them to say, hey, look, we've done a lot of business this past year, and you're kind of almost doing this review. Yeah, I want to get better. I want to strengthen our relationship. What are some areas where I can get better? What are we doing good? What are we doing bad? And you're just doing kind of that review. That's awesome, man. I mean, and that's again, not only does that shows a lot of character, I think, to to the partners, your investment partners that you're working with, right? Because everybody who's involved in the process, they're partners with together with you. That shows a lot of character, I think, to them, right? They're going to want to see, man, wow, he's asking for some feedback. Like, dude, how many of my clients do that? None of them.
Right.
I want to help them. I want to help you even more,
Exactly. I think there's a great benefit to that. Absolutely. People can see that you're a genuine person. They're just naturally going to want to do business with you. Number one.
Mm-hmm.
Number two, I had this guy, one of my private investors. I look up to this guy a lot. And, I sent him the email and he was like, number one, like, I'm proud of you for sending this email. Like, this is tough. Like, I wouldn't send this email. But then his response was crazy, man. He was like, Hector, you're a deal junkie. Like, you need to work on that. I was like, what do you mean? And he explained in his email, he was like, sometimes you go into a deal when it doesn't even make sense. And I'm talking exclusively about a fix and flip, right? Like, the numbers don't make sense, but you have to be in this deal. Like, you just have to be in this deal because you want a deal. And so it's like, deal junkie. And I was like, you know what? He's absolutely right, man. Like, I'm always in a hunt for a deal, but sometimes you don't need to be hunting for a deal. Like, sometimes you need to work on the business or do something else with your time. And you don't, I think I got caught up in, especially in the previous market that we were just in, like, to just be doing the deal, right? Like, I needed to have a deal every week or I was failing. And even if the deal didn't make sense. And so it really just brought a lot of self-awareness. It's like, wait a minute, like, what is the real motive of why I'm even like doing this deal? Is it because I'm trying to please the agent and like I'm trying to just be buddies with this person so that in the future he brings me a deal? So I'm going to say yes to a deal just because of the relationship, or is it because it's does the deal actually make sense? So don't be a deal junkie. That's what I would say to people. Like, just
I'm gonna write that down.
Understand why you're in the deal in the first place. So yeah, I mean, self-awareness is huge.
Yeah, and you wouldn't have known that, right? Like, you wouldn't have got that feedback unless you asked for it.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
you said it earlier. It was like, okay, well, these are blind spots, right? And a lot of times we do stuff a certain way, or we don't do things, whatever. Like, we operate in a certain way, and we're not aware of that, right? A lot of times, like, a lot of this takes self-reflection, and this is going far beyond business, but it's super important because this carries over not only to your business, this carries over to your family, to your personal relationships, all of that. It's like, well, what am I driving? Kind of, what are these motivators, right? Like, because these are the things that actually will, either get you going or they can hinder you, right? You're going to hit a certain level, and like that, like, okay, hey, don't be a deal junkie. What am I sacrificing just to get a deal done? Well, we got to hit, this. And so, like, what's the fuel, right? Like, certain types of motivators are great to use for short bursts, right? But over time, if you're continuing to use them, it can be toxic, right? Because it's going to spill over to other areas, right? Well, now I'm sacrificing my family, and it's like, well, what was the whole reason for me getting into investing? To have more time for my family. Yeah. It's like,
yeah. And so, one of the books, man, that really put things into perspective, and I'm kind of glad I read it in the beginning phases of my journey in real estate investing. It was Your Next 5 Moves by Patrick David. And I highly recommend any business owner, anybody to read this book. But he talks about designing a life that you want to live. You know what I mean? About this and being okay with it, right? And so he talks about, two different people. The guy that is, making $1 million, a month, right? And this guy's extremely successful, but he's like burned out and he's stressed and he's anxious. He's always angry. But he's fitting the mold of the multimillionaire, and he has everything he thinks he wants. And then he talks about the guy that's like making $200,000 a year, but he's happy with where he's at. He has time for his family, time for his kids. And like, when you're in this industry, and this is something that I try to preach a lot to people that I talk to, because when you're in this industry, it's like so competitive, and we forget why we even got into this like journey in the first place, And so I'm glad I read that book, because it put things into perspective. Like, you're a multifamily guy, right, Steve? Like you own so many apartments, and like that's your thing. Like that's what moves you, that's what shakes you. And you have certain goals, and that's good for you. You know what I mean? But for me, like if I got into multifamily right now, like it wouldn't be the right move because I would be probably a little more stressed out. I would be having to take, time away from my family, etc. So it's like you really have to be okay with the lifestyle that you want to live, not what society or other people say you should live. And we were talking about this before we got the podcast started, but like, there's a journey that, people tend to follow in real estate investing, right? You start wholesaling, then you go to fix and flip, then you're supposed to go to like new builds or new construction, and then you end up in multifamily. And it all has a place in this scale. But if it involves you sacrificing certain things at every level, like you should really look at that. And I encourage every real estate investor to look at them. It's like maybe you're supposed to just stay with your fix and flip business because it allows you to have the lifestyle that you want to live. Right? You're only flipping 10 houses a year and you are the most happy and the most filled that you have ever been. Why would you go into, the rental space? And then, if you're in the multifamily, like if you're in that place and you're happy and you're thriving and you're having an impact in the world, you just stay there. Like don't try to conquer the world. And that's, I don't know. I just felt like sharing that.
Well, somebody needed to hear it, right? And it is hard because like that, like you're right, like when we start getting into real estate, especially when you start surrounding yourself with other people, right? You and I have like some shared groups and some shared spaces. So it's like, all right, when we go to a conference or something like that, and you've got 1,000 people in the room or 500 people or however many people, and it's like, man, there's some people in there that are operating at very high levels. And it's super easy to be like, well, shoot, I'm not there. I mean, for one, great, like you can definitely glean from them, right? Like if you want to get to that next level, right? If you want to, okay, I'd like to get where you're going because that's part of what I set out to do, right? Again, this comes back to, you're talking about PBD, right? Like, I love him. He's a great entrepreneur. For those of you guys aren't familiar, Patrick Bet-David. But it's like, you have to define success for what that means for you, right? Because if not, then you're going to be shooting for something else, and you're out of step right now. That is going to create like undue stress, for you, right? You're not going to feel satisfied. You're not going to feel fulfilled, right? Even if you do hit those higher numbers, or it doesn't even have to be dollar amount, right? Because be like, well, we've got to get to this number. It's like, okay, yeah, but there's going to be a cost there, right? Like, and if you're already hitting your targets, let's say lifestyle wise and all that kind of stuff. Even without hitting that, then that's great. Hey, kudos to you. You hit your goal, right? Absolutely. Like you hit your target. But so that's that dual-edged sword, right? That's where we have to be mindful of, right? I forget who said it. It's like living on the edge, right? Like if you think of a coin, there's two sides of the coin, and it's like the goal really should be to kind of live on that real fine edge in between the coin, right? In between each side, because if you go one side, then that sacrifices the other. You go the other side, that sacrifices the other side. So it's like, well, okay, we got to try and live on that real narrow kind of edge and try to strike some balance. Yeah.
Yeah. I always try to put this in my rearview mirror, like always have it in the back of my mind that, whenever I get asked to speak in these kind of podcasts or any type of events, like I always share this because I've been through some pain, right? Like my father died, when I was 14 years old. And then my nephew, who's 8 years old, passed about a year ago. And so I've been around pain, and it just put things into perspective, because when you're around pain, when you're around pressure, and you're around, just difficult times, like it just I remember, man, just being, like going without, when my father died, like my mom having to work cleaning jobs, right? And like just to bring money to the table, and like there's no food in the fridge kind of moments. And so, when you have lived that kind of life, and then you get to a place where I'm at, and you have built something that looks successful, you always want to have something in the back of my mind. And what I've had in the back of my mind is like, you're not going to take anything that you built in this world to happen or wherever you believe you're going. You know what I mean? Like you're just going to leave it all here. So don't be
Mhm.
so connected to the material things that you forget, like you said, your purpose or why you're here. So anytime, I'm asked to speak, it's like I just want to remind people, it's like remember why you started, remember your purpose, remember what you set out to do. And as long as you have that kind of in the back of your mind, I think you'll always be successful. And that's my definition of success. It's like having the relationships that I have be thriving. I think that's the
Mm.
definition of success. The people around me, not necessarily how much money I have in the bank, and it's the life that I've created. If that makes sense.
Yeah, no. It absolutely does. And I mean, we've heard this, countless times, right? I think a lot of people have this recommendation where it's like start with the end in mind. And again, that just comes back to defining what success means to you, right? You start with that end when you start out on your journey. And that's hard to do, right? Like, because
So good.
everybody's like, oh, you got to grind and you got to, you got to do all this kind of stuff. And it's like, yeah, but if you're not really having a target, then you're just kind of working, aimlessly. And then what will end up happening, I've been here, you get so caught up in the momentum of just, and yeah, I'm sure you know it too, right? It's like you got a bunch of projects going on and you're just jamming. But after a while, like it's like you got to do this rest run, right? Like an Olympic sprinter can't sprint forever. Like at a certain point, like you've got to take some run. You got to kind of stop. All right, let me take stock. Let me take inventory of where I'm at, right? Because if not, like you're just going to run yourself into the ground, right? So it's like, we'll start with the end in mind, know where the finish line is at, know where like that, what success looks to you. And it doesn't mean you can't make adjustments to that, right? You may stop and evaluate and say, okay, you know what, we're here, but I'd still like to get here. I've got bandwidth for this. I think we need to make this tweak. Let's make this little, this quick little, make a slight adjustment in what we're doing. And I think that's going to be really beneficial to, your family, your friendships, your business, all these kind of different factors. But we've got to stop and evaluate, right? You got to evaluate the goals, and so that you're staying on track, right? And make those course corrections, right?
1,000%.
Yeah. Yeah. Really good. Well, I'm loving like the mindset conversation for sure. But I know some people, because we're going to have people that are listening that are active flippers, right? Maybe they're starting out or that kind of stuff. I want to touch a little bit on that just to kind of see if we can't glean a little bit from your professional experience. I could stay talking to you all day on the mindset stuff and all that for sure. But I want to be able to provide as much value as we can for our listeners. Now we've had a shift. We're going to go back a little bit. We've got a shift in the market for sure that started several quarters ago now. That started last year with the Fed raising rates and all that kind of stuff. Have you had to make adjustments like in your fix and flip operations, your business? Like what have you had to do to make changes or have you made any changes, in that portion of your business?
Yeah, so we got really, I wouldn't say lucky, but we're pretty blessed to be in the market in Atlanta where it's still very competitive, So in my opinion, I think we're in a market dependent, situation, right? So some markets, as we know, have gotten hit more than others. So like I know I got a lot of buddies in California. Like I just had a buddy of mine post this on Instagram. He's having to wire $100,000 just to get rid of a property, right? He's not getting any money. He had to wire $100,000. I think this morning, he posted it, and it's crazy, right? And he's in California, so I think a lot of markets have gotten hit harder than others. Personally, in Atlanta, we kind of got saved by the bell, if you will, where there's still very high demand for housing, and we're in a market where people are actually coming from California and other markets to live in Georgia. And then even more than that, I just, again, got lucky, blessed that we're actually where I live, we're in a part of like the top 10 regions of the entire state of Georgia, where it's highly sought after, very competitive, still getting multiple offers, and, housing going over asking. So but needless to say, things did slow down, right? So for
Mhm.
us last year, we were selling, houses, way over asking, with multiple offers like everybody else, right? So market was super hot, interest rates 3%, 2%, like it was crazy. And we did amazing, but slowing it down, we instead of buying everything in sight, we just got really focused on really profitable deals. So instead of, having a buy box that was pretty, kind of wide, we went very narrow. And so now we're, instead of making 40,000 in a flip, 30,000 in a flip, because we could afford to do that back then, we said, okay, now we're going to do, a lot less flips, but make a minimum of six figures, right? Like if we're not making 100,000 in a flip, we're not touching it, even if even if it is a good deal. So what we've done is just been very selective in the flips that we're taking on, and just finding the unicorns, which by the way, they're still out there. And you have to, just find them and increase your network to find those opportunities. So we've just been really selective, finding the unicorns, and then everything else that's above a certain threshold, we're wholesaling. So we just passed on a deal in Woodstock, Georgia. If anybody's in Georgia listening, super nice house. We could have made $40,000 flipping it, but we would have held on to it for 3 months, and we had a wholesale opportunity to make 20,000. So yeah, we gave up 20 grand, but in holding costs, it just doesn't even make sense to do a house flip that makes 40 grand anymore. We're gonna go after the 80,000 bare minimum entry to 100,000. So that's kind of one of the shifts that we made, is just been very selective with our flips and not flipping as much. And so it looks cool on paper and it sounds great. Oh, this guy's flipped 100 properties year after year. But the reality is, like, it's not, it sounds great, but it's really not. Like, you constantly have to raise capital. You're talking about millions of dollars like being poured in, and you're constantly having to raise money, and it's just a headache, so we're being very careful about that. But again, right now, just to finish this point out, like right now in Atlanta, we are still getting housing, that is going overpriced, and it's got multiple offer situation. And again, it's just the demand. The inventory in Atlanta is super, super low. I think we're looking at like 3 to 4 months, of lacking inventory. So we're in a great position here in Georgia, at the very least.
Yeah, no, and that's huge. And we look a lot about this, and right, and anybody who's involved in real estate really should, for one, don't listen to the news. Like if the news is saying, "Oh, real estate, the sky's falling," right? Like don't listen to, don't listen to the doom and gloom, right?
Yeah.
That's one of those things where it's like, well, real estate, everybody's heard location, location, location. Okay, and it's absolutely true, right? Like there's no one real estate market. Like real estate is hyper local, right? So like Hector's talking about it right there. He's like, well, hey, you know what? It may suck for my friend that's in California because they've had a lot of people that are leaving, right? They got a lot of businesses that are leaving. That's a tough market to be in, right? But my market's growing. I'm in a place where the jobs are coming, right? You got a lot of Hollywood, right? You've had a lot of movie production and all that kind of stuff that's been moving to, let's say, Atlanta for the last handful of years now, right? You got a lot of businesses that are going there, right? Because, there's a variety of factors for that. But that's the kind of stuff that you want to be in touch with, right? Texas, Florida, was never a political guy, but it's important to kind of follow some of that activity as well. Like if you're a business person, you need to keep tabs on some of that, right? Because again, that fuels, who's business friendly, what states have a good tax situation, right? Like, and then all of that comes down from, the political sectors, right? So whoever's kind of running the government, wherever you're at, right, in your state, your local municipality, all that kind of stuff, that can directly impact like what's going on with your investment strategy, with your business. So it's important to remember. So like that, I mean, that's awesome that because you've been in some different places. You haven't always been in Atlanta, right? You were an immigrant, you moved up to the Northeast. And so it's like, well, if you're still in the Northeast, trying to operate there, maybe the market is tougher, right? Maybe if you're in California, maybe you would be struggling too, but you're in a good market that's growing. So it's like, okay, hey, I can just double my effort here, right? Like I can, and be more selective, right? Like you're working, and that's the interesting thing too, right? You're working less, likely making more, right? If you were making 30 grand a deal, just trying to force, again, this is not being the deal junkie, right? This is taking the feedback. Okay, I don't have to do the $30,000 deal because now I got to raise capital for 3 separate deals. I got 3 transactions going on. I got 3 crews, all of that. And now I can just focus on one. Well, that means you actually have a little bit less hectic, a little bit slower kind of pace, right? I'm just looking for those solid deals that are going to make me, and that takes some stress out of your life too.
Yeah, 1,000%. I was talking to my private lender, and same guy that was calling me deal junkie, and he told me, he said, a lot of the more successful guys actually scale down, and if you think about it, like the operational cost that it takes to do 100 deals, you're talking about a staff of 10 plus people, contractors coming in and out. Like, dude, it's a lot of work. But he was sharing with me, the guys that I've seen through the market shifts, through many different years and episodes of the country's economy, like, are the guys that are successful in those changes are the guys that like really scale down and just kind of repeat what they're really good at instead of trying everything under the sun. So they're not affected by a market shift because they're just consistently, getting home runs, if that makes sense. And it doesn't matter what kind of market they're in,
Right. Well, you're building your skill set, right? There's the Pareto Principle, right? The 80-20. And it's like, okay, well, 80% of, what you're doing is not going to generate, the vast majority of your income. It's the 20, right? So if you continually focus and refine on the 20, then the 20 is going to be more and more efficient. That'll allow you to be better and better and better. And that's why you're seeing that trend. Well, yeah. Well, Hector, this is a point in the show where we kind of transition to a little bit kind of more shorter questions and a little bit deeper dive, just real quick. It's called the fire round. Is that something you're game for?
Let's do it.
All right, right on. So you mentioned this book earlier, so this will be a little bit easier for you. So it's like, well, what is the best book that you recommend other than Rich Dad Poor Dad?
Yeah, Rich Dad Poor Dad's great. Your Next 5 Moves, that we mentioned that book as well. But I recently just started rereading Miracle Morning. I don't know if you've read that book. And that's actually where I got the idea to send the email, by the way. Like that book talks about sending an email to, your constituents, etc. But yeah, Miracle Morning, I forget the guy's last name, but his first name is Hal.
Hal Rod.
Yep, there you go. Incredible book, man. Everybody that's a business owner needs to read that book.
No, that's great. Yeah, super solid recommendation for sure. And I've heard that for sure. Plenty of people. And yeah, Your Next 5 Moves, a great book as well. So yeah, awesome recommendations. Next question: what would you consider your superpower?
My superpower, I think, is just that's a tough one, man. But I would say, like, what comes to mind right away is just networking. Like, I'm a good connector with people, and I read one time in another book, like, if you want to be successful at networking and, have influence in the world, like, you really need to be the guy that connects this person and that person, because you're going to be known, by many people and have influence over many people. So I would say I do that pretty well. We just started monthly meetups here in the Atlanta area. And, we're having amazing turnout, better than we expected. People coming out and registering for our events. And, we want to be known in our market as the guys that, like, know the lender, know the private money guy, the contractor, the agent, right? Because eventually, like, they're going to pass on deals to us, and we'll kind of be living in that flow of conversation. So I'd say my superpower is connecting people and just networking. And, I reached out to you, we messaged, and here we are doing a podcast. I would say, networking.
Right on. Yeah, that's a great skill. And not everybody can do it. So, like, those of you that are on the fence about, like, hey, I haven't done any deals yet, or I've only done a couple of deals. Like, I can't go to a networking meetup. Those people are going to know more than, dude, just show up. show up.
Show up, man.
Show up.
Don't be scared. Last
Yeah.
night I was telling everybody at the meetup, turn to the person next to you and tell them who cares, and I said that because like we're talking about social media and posting and like doing the content. It's the same thing with networking and the same thing with social media. Like, who cares what people think? At the end of the day, are you about your business or are you not? Are you gonna have that conversation even when you're uncomfortable? Are you gonna post that piece of content even when you're uncomfortable? And a lot of times it goes back to the very beginning of this conversation, it's mindset and like having those limiting beliefs that, what is somebody going to say about me if I quit my job? Like, who cares? You know what I mean?
No, very good. That's awesome. I know. Yeah, we've got our monthly meetup actually tonight. So here in a few hours, several hours.
Let them know
we'll
who cares.
Stuff, so. But like Hector said, it all the way from Georgia. All right, next question. What is the biggest lesson that you've learned over your career thus far?
The biggest lesson that I've learned over my career, I would say take the risk, but take the calculated risk. A lot of people just get into a deal just because they want to be, impulsive and make the decision and not like live in this analysis paralysis world. And we are told like, go for it, just jump the gun, like quit your job and like just we're told not to be in analysis paralysis. But then people do that and they fall on their face with their first flip because they weren't calculated about the risk. And so they do the flip and then they find that they hate real estate investing, or they get into a bad deal and then they think like this is not for them. That's not the case. Your purpose may be in real estate investing, but you just went about it the wrong way the first time. So I would say what I've learned is, I've been very risk adverse, and not risk adverse, but I've been very risky at taking action. But I wish I would have been more calculated at taking my risk and not just, firing away. So I would say my biggest lesson so far has been take the risk, but make sure it's a calculated one.
Yeah, very good. Count the cost, right? Yeah. For the busy working professional working towards financial freedom, what advice would you have for them?
The busy professional, man, I would say, continue to get educated. Everything we talked about in this podcast, get educated, find a mentor, work on your self-awareness, make sure that you're aware of your strengths and your weaknesses, and then just continue to get better 1% daily, every single day. Do something that moves the needle in your business. I recently read a book by Brad Lee. You guys know him on Instagram, etc. I forget the name of the book. I think it's called The Biggest Mistakes That I Made, So You Don't Have to. Highly recommend that book, by the way. But one of the things he says, he says, oh my goodness, just escaped me. But what was it about risk? What was I just talking about, Steve? Remind me. What was the busy professional? That's it. So he talks about how he has a morning routine, and it's like the millionaire morning routine, Brad Lee's millionaire morning routine. You can Google that. And in that routine that he has something that he does every single day, and he intentionally looks for ways to drive revenue in his business. And he does this every single day. So I actually just started implementing this in part of my morning ritual. I'll do prayer and I'll read my Bible and I'll, do some affirmations, the visualization, and all that stuff is great. But then when you add that piece of like, what can I do today to generate revenue to my company? Man, that's powerful, bro. And, he shares how he went, from broke to rich really, really quickly just by implementing that thing alone. And I would say, add that to your wheelhouse, and everything else I talked about. Mentorship, self-awareness, but then also, create a morning ritual that adds that piece. Like, what can I do today to add revenue to my life, business, etc.?
Yeah, no, that's really good. That's really good because it spurs action and it forces you to be maybe reflective on what you're doing, what you're not doing, right? So not really good. Well, how can our audience, if they want to reach out to you, how can they get in touch with you? What's the best avenues?
Probably Instagram. I'm mostly active on Instagram, but across all platforms, hectormartinez.rei. That's where you can find me. So pretty much all social media platforms, but I'm most active on Instagram.
Awesome. Very cool. Well, Hector, it's been a pleasure having you on the show, man. Like I said, I feel like I could talk to you for hours.
Yeah.
But I want to be mindful of your time. I know I really appreciate you coming on today. Super excited to see the future and what's in store for you guys. And so, yeah, super excited for that. But again, thanks for coming on and really appreciate having you on the show today.
Yeah, appreciate it, Steve. Thank you, man. Looking forward to the next one. Appreciate you.
All right. We'll see you next time. Aloha.
Yeah.
Oh, what a great episode with Hector Martinez, who's doing fix and flips over in Atlanta, but obviously having an impact and tons of additional insight and wisdom that he's had. For one, not only in his career in real estate, he's doing fix and flips, he's doing long-term rentals, short-term rentals, had a lot of success there in Georgia, there in the Atlanta market, but he's got an awesome story in terms of how he got to that point. Of course, everybody's got their own unique story, and he's got a really, really great one. Lots of great recommendations. I took a ton of notes, so make sure that you're going back and listening to the episode. Some great ones that he had, being self-aware, not only for you, right, to do kind of a reevaluation of, hey, how did this year go, right? Like, how's my business going? How am I on track for my, for my targets? But also too, like asking those that are around you, people that you're working with, that are maybe partners, let's say, in your business or service partners or however that may look for you, for your business. What are things I'm great at? What are things I'm not? Right? Get some feedback. I mean, not only does that get you better as a business operator, but this also going to strengthen the relationship with, that individual partner. It speaks a lot about your character. It speaks a lot about you wanting to get better. Right. So that was a huge takeaway. Of course, investing in the right locations, right? He shared the story about, one of an associate or somebody they know as a friend that's flipping, that's having to, write checks for deals to go away. And I've heard that too. Like, I've heard stories of that, people having to do that in this current market. But because of course he's investing in the right market, hot market, making sure that you're following demographic trends, migration patterns, all that kind of stuff. And it's huge. Don't just think, all right, well, cool. What should I do? Fix and flip? Should I do rental? Well, depends. Where are you at? Not saying that those strategies can't work in each and every market, but there's going to be better areas that will work better for. So being mindful of that is really good. Talking back about the self-awareness, one thing was don't be a deal junkie, right? For him, don't do things necessarily just to do them, right? But do them with a purpose. Don't get so tied up necessarily in just having to do stuff just for the sake of it, right? Have it, make sure that it's in alignment with your goals, right? And again, that comes back to self-evaluation, making sure that you're on track to do what's right for you, what's a good fit for you and your family and what you need to have happen, right? Had some great book recommendations, of course. The Millionaire Morning, what's some other ones here that he had? It's just so many. Of course, Rich Porter, Your Next 5 Moods. That's actually a really good business book recommendation from PBD, Patrick Bet-David. So definitely take those out. But tons of gems to take away from Hector. So super thankful to have had him on the show. He obviously brought a ton of value. So definitely check him out on all social platforms. I know he's active on Instagram a lot. So Hector Martinez, just make sure you check him out there. Of course, if you guys are interested in investing with us, go to tricityequity.com to learn more. We've always got kind of deals working, and there's always potential for stuff to come about. So connect with like-minded investors. Of course, join our Facebook group, Honolulu Multifamily and More. We're here locally in the Honolulu area. So if you're planning a trip out, if you are local here and you want to come out and connect with other investors, if you've got experience, if you don't have experience, if you're just curious, come out and check us out. It's always great to meet other people that are working in the space, that are where you want to go, or if you want to just level up. Again, there's always a great turnout. We've got one coming up tonight. So make sure that you are checking out the group, that we have those every month. All right. So of course, if you found value in the podcast, please subscribe. We'd love a 5-star review on wherever you're listening to us, whether that be Apple Podcasts, that be Stitcher. Of course, if you're seeing us on YouTube, we'd love a comment. Leave us a comment below what you enjoyed about the show. And if you didn't like it, let us know why you didn't like it. Or if you want to see different guests or whatever, just make sure you're checking us out. We'd really appreciate that. Then, of course, we've got the Hawaii Millionaire Mindset Conference, the second one happening this year, June 29th through July 1st. It's going to be over on the Big Island of Hawaii, over at the Maunalani Resort. So, of course, you want to go make sure that you're making plans to be there. And if you want to network with just some of the best people in the industry, last year's event was amazing. Had so many awesome business entrepreneurs, speakers, so many people that are operating at a really high level. So, make sure that you're making plans to be there. But that's going to be it for today, guys. Really appreciate everybody tuning in, and we'll see you next time. Aloha.